If you asked me to make a list of the most intriguing prospects in the 2025 NFL Draft, my number one would be no debate. Travis Hunter is the potential number one pick, and in this video, I'm going to dive into how much teams will value his two-way ability. If you're new, subscribe to the channel as I will be doing draft content all year long. But for now, I'm Chase Keller, and welcome to the true draft value of Travis Hunter. Enjoy. Travis Hunter has been a known name and face ever since he was in high school. He was a two-way threat where he basically played every position on offense. Most notably, he was a threat in the receiving game, going for 3,963 yards and 48 receiving touchdowns in his high school career, including 1,700 yards and 24 touchdowns in his junior season. On defense, he primarily played cornerback and went for 116 tackles, 18 pass deflections, and 19 interceptions. His impact on the field and his intriguing skill set gave him the number one spot in basically every single high school recruiting ranking for the class of 2022. He originally committed to Florida State before backing out and flipping his commitment in one of the most shocking decisions in high school recruitment history.
This will look real good too, but that ain't my. This will look real good too, but I'm gonna say that for later. I don't like this one. It fit me well, but that ain't who I want. I always been on my mind. But check me out, Mom. Throw me that hat.
In his freshman year under Coach Prime and Jackson State, he caught 18 passes for 190 yards and 4 touchdowns, while making 19 tackles, breaking up 8 passes, and picking 2 more off. While these numbers aren't the most impressive, he still picked up important playing time under one of the most marketable coaches in the country at any level of football. Which is why when Deion Sanders chose to go from Jackson State to Colorado, Hunter didn't hesitate to follow him. On December 19, 2022, Hunter decided he was entering the transfer portal. Just 3 days later, he was a Colorado Buffalo. In his sophomore season, Hunter caught 57 passes for 721 yards and 5 touchdowns, and made 31 tackles with 5 pass deflections and 3 interceptions. His efforts as an all-purpose player landed him as a first-team All-American on most lists, including AP's. Despite the Buffaloes going 4-8 in 2023, Hunter is staying with the Buffaloes and will likely enter the draft after his junior season. Mock Draft Database has Hunter listed as the number one prospect in the 2025 NFL Draft, him being listed as a corner, which sparks up some questions. I understand that Hunter plays on both sides of the ball, but just how much will teams value that in the NFL? That's what I'm going to go over today. How much will NFL teams value a two-way draft prospect? Before we dive into Hunter's two-way nature, let's take a look at some NFL players that also played both ways. And well, after doing some research, it's very clear that the art of the two-way player is falling apart. The biggest active example is Marcus Jones, who has played a total of 434 snaps in his 2-year career. Most of those snaps have come at corner, where he has 2 career interceptions with the New England Patriots and a pick 6 that came in 2022. Alongside that, 19 of those snaps came on offense as a wide receiver, where he actually has 1 career receiving touchdown. Baltimore Ravens fullback Patrick Ricard has 225 defensive snaps on his resume alongside 2,871 career offensive snaps, but he has not played a snap on defense since the 2019 season. There are other players who play on both sides, like defensive tackles Jeffrey Simmons and Christian Wilkins, who will sometimes come in as a fullback on goal line situations. We also just saw Sione Vaki get drafted to the Detroit Lions, and he can play both running back and safety. There are many other examples of two-way players that have played in the NFL before, like Charlie Bednarik, Troy Brown, Lou Groza. But we rarely see players play on both sides of the ball in today's league, which sets Hunter back. Coach Prime has called for teams to use Hunter as a two-way player even before he's in the league, saying that, "I think any organization that drafts him would be idiotic not to give him an opportunity to play on both sides of the ball." It's hard to determine whether or not Travis Hunter will be an outlier, but we can determine his value as a cornerback and a wide receiver separately. So here's that evaluation. Let's start with the cornerback position. As I mentioned earlier, in his first 2 seasons as a Buffalo, Hunter has gathered 5 interceptions with 13 pass breakups. Going deeper into his coverage statistics, he's allowed 46 receptions on 90 targets for 699 yards, 5 touchdowns, and the aforementioned picks. I understand the jump up in level of competition, but all 5 of those touchdowns came from his season with Colorado. Alongside that, his coverage numbers took a step backwards in less games than his first year. But also to his defense, he had one outlier game, and it was a really bad one against Stanford, where he had to guard Elik Iomanner. So if you take away that one bad game, Hunter allowed 19 catches on 34 targets for 256 yards and 3 touchdowns, significantly better than before. But you can't particularly ignore that game as it happened anyways. But he only had one other game where he allowed 3 receptions or more, and that was up against Arizona. Primarily lined up against Tetairoa McMillan, he allowed 8 catches on 12 targets for 73 yards and a touchdown. That touchdown was allowed to McMillan. The 2 receivers I just named are the 2 best receivers that Hunter faced all season, when taking 2025 NFL draft stock into account. This brings up a potential issue. He has yet to prove himself against higher NFL talents. This upcoming season, he will have shots against Torrey Horton for a full game and Tetairoa McMillan again. And if he continues to show most struggles against NFL level players, his stock will go down. So what about the traits? What does Hunter show on film? I think it's time to flip over to the positive side of things, beginning with his good measurables. He's a little slender, but his 6'1" height with top-notch arm length is going to get him places. His wingspan out of high school would be in the 65th percentile of NFL corners, let alone we don't have an official wingspan measurement from college, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. As a side note, that height is in the 81st percentile of NFL corners. His arm length and just general great ball concentration allows for fantastic ball skills at catch point. As shown in his aforementioned production, he's able to disrupt passing angles and use physicality at the catch point to deflect passes, even at awkward angles where some would say it's a ball where only the receiver can get it. Out of man coverage, he's got the fluidity to stay on routes and the explosiveness to recover from mistakes early in the down. His footwork could use some heavy work though, as it shows in his transitions out of his back pedal to anticipate the cut. Along with that, it allows for some sloppy reps when covering catch and run plays. He's able to recognize the route efficiently, but he does struggle to recognize the pass. As a result of that, he can tend to gamble on deep balls and not recognize the throw coming his way in time. He has the tendency to keep his eyes away from the ball and stay attached to the receiver. This was on Prime Showcase when he allowed 7 catches for 134 yards and 2 touchdowns to Ali Manor alone when they played Stanford in Week 7. So while his ball skills and athletic traits can really come in handy, he's got to work on that footwork and those tendencies to turn his head away from the ball. When it comes to zone coverage, he's got good instincts to anticipate the pass and click and close on the receiver. While this could use work because of his footwork, his instincts in themselves are very solid. He's able to maneuver around his zones at high efficiencies and make plays in jumping the route. Overall, he is strong in both man and zone coverage. So while Hunter doesn't have the statistics to prove his worth against NFL level receivers, he does have the traits to make it happen in 2024. And this is just half of what makes up Hunter's game. Let's dive into the wide receiver end of things. When it comes to Hunter's outlook as a wide receiver, he doesn't seem as trait-filled as he is as a corner, but his production is more fascinating when it comes to that as a wideout, at least in my opinion. He's just over 900 receiving yards in his collegiate career with 9 touchdowns, a reception percentage of 77.9%, and a passer rating of 129.3 when targeted. Of course, playing with a decent collegiate quarterback in Shedeur Sanders will help boost those numbers, but it's still all intriguing nonetheless. Hunter also has 1 dropped pass on 95 career targets, which is pretty outstanding. And while he's had the same coach in his 2 collegiate seasons, he spent a lot more time in the slot with Colorado than he did with Jackson State. Some of that might have to do with him being more lean, but it's still an intriguing thing to look at. And him spending a lot of time in the slot shows in his receiving depth. Over half of his targets in 2023 came within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, and he actually saw a lot of his yak opportunities in these games. CUBuffs.com contributing editor Neil Wolk talked with Sean Lewis, the Buffs offensive coordinator, before the 2023 season, and he told the media that he quote-unquote wants to get the ball into as many playmakers' hands as often as possible. I want to get the ball to our playmakers and utilize all their skill sets and get that speed in space as early and as often as possible. And that's where I begin with Hunter's positives as a wide receiver when it comes to his traits. He is 101% a playmaker on offense. As I mentioned earlier about his cornerback traits, he's an explosive athlete who can get up to speed extremely fast. And that shows in his open field ability, where he gets the ball and explodes. But his athletic profile doesn't just end there. He runs a 4.4 40-yard dash, and that translates over to game speed. He's also got the lateral agility, which mixing in with his explosiveness allows for him to be a productive route runner and lets him make great cuts as both a route runner and an open field threat. It's just crazy to me how big Hunter's athletic profile is and how it allows for him to play both offense and defense. Where have we seen a ridiculous athletic profile being shown on both offense and defense? Well, Marcus Jones is more recent, but I'm thinking a lot of Adoree Jackson. Another positive to his game as a receiver actually comes from his ability to play on both ends of the ball. He does a great job at reading the mind of the defense when facing zone coverages. Let's go back to what I said about him being a corner. When it comes to zone coverage, he's got good instincts to anticipate the pass and click and close on the receiver. He's able to maneuver around these zones at high efficiencies and make plays in jumping the route. So what gives him a positive as a receiver is his ability to think like a cornerback when facing zone coverages. He does a fantastic job at reading the zones and getting into space. That spatial awareness is what gets him a lot of opportunities going deep, as he caught 50% of his deep targets with an average depth of target at 37.4. Tagging along with that, he's able to read the anticipation and make combo routes look easy, as he can perfectly time that click and close to create separation from the DB. On the downside of his ability as a wideout, he does get outmuscled by DBs way too often. He struggles to use legal contact to create separation, which will lead to troubles when facing press coverage in the NFL. Luckily for him, if he does play slot receiver at the next level, he won't be seeing a lot of press coverage. And adding on to that, his good length allows for him to add more muscle and weight without going into his athleticism. But overall, Travis Hunter is more of a proven prospect as a wide receiver than he is as a corner. But if you're taking Hunter, would you rather have him as a proven wide receiver Or would you rather have him as a raw, high upside cornerback? Or would you play him on both sides of the ball? Let's wrap everything up and discuss the outlook of Travis Hunter going into his junior year. Travis Hunter has strengths and weaknesses at both the cornerback position and the wide receiver position. And as previously mentioned, we don't see many two-way players in the NFL anymore, and it's much more common at the collegiate level. The odds are stacked against Hunter to play on both sides of the ball. So, despite the two-way practices vanishing in modern-day NFL, is it still possible for Hunter to play on both sides of the ball? Absolutely. With how talented Hunter is at both positions, it would not shock me if he sets a new benchmark for two-way players at the professional level. Let's look at Adoree Jackson like we just mentioned earlier. In 2015, he only had 27 targets as a receiver, but bloomed as a corner. He had a 79.1 grade as a receiver, which graded as the 50th best receiver in 2015, and a 73.1 grade as a cornerback, which was 141st. As we know, Jackson ended up as the 18th overall pick in the 2017 NFL Draft to the Tennessee Titans as a cornerback prospect. But we are talking about a potential number 1 overall pick, and in my eyes, I don't think he goes number 1 if the draft was held today. So what does Hunter have to do if he wants to be the number 1 overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft? Well, I think he has to solidify himself as at least a top 5 prospect at either cornerback or wide receiver strictly. Obviously, he's great at both, but he won't be a game changer unless he can get himself to that point. If he's primarily being looked at as a cornerback, he won't be drafted over guys like Will Johnson or Benjamin Morrison unless he can show that he's a top 5 cornerback prospect. If he can't be a top 5 receiver, he won't be taken over a guy like Luther Burden. But of course, Hunter is a very special prospect, and he will be looked at in a different way than everyone else in this class. So, if we're being honest here, it's extremely difficult to determine the current draft value of Travis Hunter. Well, that was my report on Travis Hunter's current draft value. What do you think of the report? Where do you think Hunter's current draft value is? Let me know in the comment section below. Wait, are you not subscribed yet? Well, do it now. I release content like this all the time and would really appreciate your support. I'm Chase Keller from Chase Keller Journalism, and I will see you all next time.